Oh, do we clap?
All right, so welcome everyone, both in the room and at home, to the first class of 11th Cell. Thanks so much for spending time with us on Sunday. We're looking forward to the entirety of what this class is going to be. Each one of the cohorts that we've had has been an adventure, and we're excited to kick this adventure off with y'all. For everyone here in the room, there's like a little bit of rope, and then there's the mats that we're sitting on. Those delineate the spaces that are on camera. If you don't want to be on camera, please avoid those spaces. If you don't care, you're fine to go wherever you want.
A handy, just sort of visual reference, that beam that has the camera on it, right, is kind of a good delineator. If you stay behind that, you will not be on camera. If you come forward of that, you might be, right? And especially if you're on this side of the room, toward this door, chances are very high that you will be on camera.
Yeah.
So if you want to avoid that and being on the internet for forever, stay away.
In addition to that, we wanted to introduce ourselves and introduce the team that's sort of supporting us. So my name is Andrew. My pronouns are he and him. I go by OGFan on FatLife and on Instagram. I will be one of your instructors for the next 20 months.
I'm Melissa, also known as Good Most Times. Pronouns are she, her. And I am, yes, Good Most Times on all the social media. And
I'm Ordinals. I'm going to be behind the camera for like 98% of this. My pronouns are they, them.
And
I want to acknowledge that we also have a couple folks helping us out, but primarily this space we're in is different and new to most people who have even heard that the CEL program exists. We are here in the bank, DTLA, which is at the behest of our gracious host, Captain Daddy, sir. And I want to acknowledge them. They'll also be TAing with us. They have graduated the CEL program, so they're going to be helping out. Our other TA on hand today is Blue Moon, who's going to be rotating and helping out today, and probably throughout the cohort. So you'll see them around, and you can ask them for help.
Yep. And in addition, we have some TAs that are helping answer questions in the chat.
Yeah,
You know,
I do. We've got 3 remote moderators who will be helping me out in the chat. They have a little hex wrench icon next to their name if you're in the chat. Please listen to them like you would listen to any of us.
They should have our authority to bounce people out of the chat if they're being disrespectful or otherwise disruptive, and we give them that full power and authority. We will not be answering questions for folks on the stream. Our primary focus, is the people in the room. Someone's trying to get into the building.
So our mods today are Priscilla, John Doe, and Rebecca DMS, if you're looking for their names in the chat.
Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Oh, did you give your pronouns?
I did do my pronouns. I did want to make a couple of notes. One for folks in the room, one for folks on the stream. For folks on the stream, when you are posting in chat, whatever name you've got set in your YouTube account is what people are going to see. So please be aware of that and sort of engage with your own comfort level. And then for folks in the room, because of the way that we have it mic'd, your crosstalk is going to make it hard to hear when Andrew and Melissa are presenting, so please be mindful of that. Similarly, please be mindful if you are making comments during instructional time, that might also appear on the audio. So again, sort of engage at your own comfort level for those things.
And just a quick note, we do have a camera set up, a microphone set up over there near the broadcast hub. And that's to help pick up your questions. So when you have questions for us, that the people on the stream will be able to hear those questions, that we won't need to repeat them, hopefully. But that can impede the actual audio if you're talking while we're teaching. In general, if we're talking, you shouldn't be. Quick rule of thumb, so yeah.
So, what are we going to cover today?
Well, should we talk about just general expectations for the cohort?
I mean, that's part of what we're going to cover today.
Awesome.
Part of what we're going to cover today is a bit of a user manual from what to expect from us and what to expect from this cohort. So, how we expect for you to interact with us, how we expect for you to interact with each other, what resources are available to you and what you should leverage. We're going to talk about like what our intentions are, what this space is meant to be, and what we're trying to accomplish, and make sure that those things are in alignment with what your goals are overall. When we're done talking about that, we're going to talk a bit about safety as well as negotiation. Once we're done with those things, we'll take a brief break, and then we'll come back and we'll work on the single and double column ties from the videos that y'all should have been studying leading up to this month. Is that it? Am I missing anything?
I believe that is it.
Awesome.
Today.
So let's talk a little bit about expectations. Everyone in the room was interviewed by somebody who either has been an instructor for these classes or who's been a student and graduate of these classes. Those folks are really familiar with kind of how we operate and what the expectations are. Those things should have been pretty clearly enumerated, but just to make sure that everyone understands. The idea of this cohort broadly is that you are a learning group that exists to support each other throughout the entirety of this experience. So you have all of us, you have a pool of TAs, but more importantly, you have each other to support each other, right? Part of the reason that this cohort's gonna exist for the entirety of the time that we're here is that we are going to learn in an iterative fashion. We are going to use a certain set of terminology and lexicon. You will all have that shared terminology and lexicon, and you'll be able to use that as a shorthand for interacting with people in the room. That terminology and lexicon, like the instruction, evolves over time. So you might run into somebody who learned in 4th cell or 5th cell or 7th cell, and their terminology might be slightly, if not wildly different than yours. Melissa and I keep learning, and part of the reason that we do this is as a motivation to get out and force us to continue to learn. But as we do, we take the things that we have learned, adopt them, and integrate them into how we teach, which means it changes slightly over time. If somebody from a previous cohort is curious about a thing that you tied or says that their experience is different than yours, yep, it likely will be. And that is totally cool. Secondarily, sort of to talk about our perspective as instructors, the thing that we are approaching instructing here is erotic sadomasochistic bondage. And what that terminology means to us is erotic is based in the eros, arousal, sexual portion of the mind. I do this thing, Melissa does this thing, Ordinals does this thing as a function of what we enjoy sexually. I want to caveat that with, I am not here and none of us are here to dictate what is sexy or sexual to you. If this practice is not that thing to you, I am not here to project what I enjoy into all of your heads. I am not here to force that context onto you. There may be instances where I make comment of like, I really enjoy this thing because of this. That does not mean to be a statement of what is or should be valid for anyone else in this room. It is a singular perspective that is mine.
And also, if what we're doing is in no way sexual for you, that's also okay, right? Like, we don't prescribe anyone's sexuality or what arouses them. Some people do this purely as an aesthetic art form or a way to connect with the person that they're tying, but with no sexual connection. Totally fine, right? Like, we don't say what is or isn't that thing. Just know that that's our primary motivation.
All of those things are rad. I'm just telling you the perspective we're coming from. Sadomasochistic in the sense that in the way we tie or the things we will be interacting with, there will be intense physical experiences that most people would classify as pain. Sometimes those are not purposeful. Sometimes those are purposeful. A lot of what we're trying to achieve with this instruction is to make them more often purposeful than accidental. We want you to be a jerk on purpose, not a jerk on accident.
Yeah. We do have kind of a catchphrase, which is be an asshole on purpose.
Yeah. Don't accidentally hurt somebody. Hurt somebody on purpose because that's what they deserve.
Or that was your intention.
Sure.
Right? Do it with intentionality.
Yeah.
We're trying to alleviate unintentional harm.
And then bondage in the sense that a lot of the ties that we will be focused on specifically inhibit movement of the person being tied. There will be some but not a ton of focus specifically on the aesthetic of tying. There will be interaction and discussion of aesthetic and developing your own aesthetic and understanding where aesthetics come from. But that isn't the primary focus of the thing that we're doing, right? It is a discussion point along the way.
Right. And you may see, or may have already seen in your journeys through the wide world of rope out and about, both in person and online, a lot of things that are really pretty and that are maybe what some might say are like decorative or like fashion almost. To us, those are less bondage, right? Because the person is not being restricted in that particular tie. And we will be doing some of those, but that is a function of helping to develop an aesthetic and helping to develop a way to speak about a particular tie rather than our primary focus.
And finally, and most importantly, what we are not trying to do is we are not trying to turn all of you in this room into little versions of us. We don't want you to come out of this room tying like us. We want to give you the fundamental building blocks of rope to go out into the world and tie like you. We are interested in exploding the diversity of rope and not pushing sort of a homogeneous agenda of rope. There is no singular school that we adhere to. The choices that we have made for patterns, while they may come from a specific school, in all instances were chosen specifically for the components of those and how those components could be understood and utilized in other sorts of patterns, right? This isn't for you to come out and tie the hands behind tie that I tie or suspend in the manner that I tie. There will be a certain amount of that happens just because of the nature of how we need to teach. But ultimately, I hope that you all keep in mind, hey, I am here for the specific purpose of someday seeing one of you tie and going, holy shit, I never thought of that. That is rad. That is the thing I want more than anything else. And that is the moment when I feel most proud and most fulfilled as a teacher. So seeing you tie like I tie, while that will be flattering and lovely, is not what the point is, right?
The other goal that we have, and Andrew kind of alluded to this already, is that you all, once you finish the curriculum, and probably even before that, will be able to go into almost any class, almost any learning environment, watch what the person is doing, and understand the components that went into it. And so not necessarily that you would immediately be able to replicate what they did, but understand the foundational pieces that they're using to follow along, at the very least. You would be able to probably keep up. And this, when you see classes listed as intermediate, advanced, you will definitely be able to follow along at an intermediate level and probably also do okay in the advanced classes. That doesn't mean that we think that you are advanced.
It doesn't mean I think I'm advanced.
Correct. That was what I was going to get to. I don't consider myself advanced at rope. That's going to be something that you all determine for yourselves. Levels are kind of arbitrary, but for the most part, what people mean when they say that something is advanced is that you have experience having done some suspension. You will do that in this class as part of the curriculum. However, we're not going to do a ton of dynamic transitions. That's outside the scope of what we're going to cover. So if you see a class that's hey, we're going to do a ton of transitions, maybe ease up and don't do that. Or ask if you can come as an observer.
Or go and watch, yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of level setting for us. Our goal is for you to be able to go out with your own unique voice in rope, and also to be able to engage in the larger community, taking classes, engaging in different stuff at a level where you feel comfortable with what other folks are doing. And you'll have some tools, ways to ask questions, and a common vocabulary amongst yourselves to feel confident in what you're doing.
And all of this is meant to apply to not just the people who are tying, but the people who are in rope as well. So part of the reason that Melissa and I co-teach in the manner that we do is that in as much as we can, we are attempting to give the perspectives of both the person tying and the person being tied. All of this for the folks who will be in rope in this room
are meant to give you context to be able to have more nuanced conversations with not only the person that you tie within this room, but with anyone that you might tie with, right? And to give you a set of baseline experiences to be able to express yourself, to be able to express your desires, and to be able to protect yourselves as you sort of navigate the community. Does that stuff all make sense? Sweet.
And to that point, for the folks in this room, or whatever pairings are gonna happen throughout the course of the curriculum, if folks do engage in a power exchange dynamic, we highly recommend that the person at the sort of commanding level either grant access, grant permission, or make an explicit order to the person who is, in the service role, that their job is to give feedback. It is absolutely vital as part of this curriculum that the person being tied is giving feedback about the tie. We're here to get better at a thing. If you don't get feedback, you can't get better. And my understanding is y'all signed up for 20 months of this because you want to get better. So it doesn't have to happen in this moment because we're we're broadcasting, but at some point along in the next week, you need to have that conversation of my expectation is you will be giving me feedback along the way, because otherwise how are you going to get better?
Mm-hmm. So that's sort of the underlying premises of what you're going to experience here. Does anyone have any questions about any of that stuff?
I know it's a lot. We just covered a lot.
Yeah, we're like the first half of this class is a whole bunch of exposition dump, so cool.
The great thing is it's all being broadcast and will be uploaded so you can review it later.
Yeah. And if you don't have any questions here right now, I know that for a lot of people it's difficult to immediately conceive of questions that they have or that they occur later. This is why things like Slack exist. This is why things like email exist. This is why things like Discord exist.
Yeah.
Feel free to ask us questions at any time about anything.
And as you all know, you have access to your 11 Cell Slack channel that's just for you. There is also within that Slack, there's a broader, previous cohorts are also in that Slack server, but we also have a public Discord server, if y'all are not aware. And the Monday after every class, so tomorrow and going forward, Andrew will be doing office hours primarily for the folks on the stream, but if you all have questions, you're more than welcome to come join that. So yeah, we'll be doing that as an additional support mechanism.
Mm-hmm. And the final topic that I want to cover before we start to talk about negotiation and safety is sort of accountability and how accountability fits into the cohorts that we have. Welcome, you are now students of this class and nominally parts of the Devil Mask Society. What is the Devil Mask Society? It's an anarchistic rope collective. What does that mean? People exist in the space as much as they want to exist in the space and with the capability that they choose to. They take on the responsibilities that they want when they want to take them on, right? The important underlying factor of Devil Mask Society is there is no leader. Melissa and I, Nora, anyone who is a parent in Devil Mask Society, none of us are leaders. Ordinals, anyone. Thing number 2, we are all accountable to anyone else in Devil Mask Society. If anyone has any sort of concern about anything that I say in this room, about anything that Melissa says in this room, about anything that Ordinal says in this room, about anything that any of the moderators say while they're in the chat, about anything that the TAs say within the context of this room, you are all capable of holding any of us accountable at any time. When you are out existing in the community, there will be people who will be apparently associated with Devil Mask Society. There will be people who are not apparently associated with Devil Mask Society. They all hold each other accountable for how they interact and for being good citizens within the environment that they inhabit. I now empower you to do that, right? And to do that responsibly, meaning if you see something confusing or something that doesn't align with what you feel is the right thing to do, start asking someone questions. If that person doesn't have answers and or is defensive about the thing that they're doing, start asking other people that are associated with DMS questions. We as a larger, broader group are here to support each other, not just when we are succeeding out in the world where people see us, but also when we're falling down and helping to pick each other up. And so I both empower you and make you accountable for doing that thing, right? You are now not only like empowered to do it, but you're responsible for doing it, right? Part of the fee that you're paying us for this class is letting us know if we fuck up, is letting other people out there know if they fuck up, is holding them accountable and responsible for their actions and being who they should be within the community. It should be said at this point, the thing that we are doing is radical sexuality. There are very few people in this world broadly who generally address their interests and desires when it comes to sex. There are even fewer people who express those to other people. There are even fewer people who enact those things. An even smaller subset of those will seek out education. And a very, very, very small group of people will involve themselves in the type of education that you're engaging in for the length of time that you're engaging in it. That is radical to most people in the world. It is also a specifically political statement. If you are not on board with the politics of this type of radical sexuality, you should do some introspection towards yourself, especially on days like this, about why you're inhabiting spaces without thinking about the impact that you have on those spaces, right? And so for us, that accountability is not only about making sure that we're on point, but making sure that everyone else is on point and that they have an alignment not just in what they're doing from a time perspective, but what their reasons are for being in any room that they are in. So please take that seriously. Please take that seriously when it comes to us. Please take that seriously when it comes to each other.
And for us, primarily when we say holding people accountable, it is what Andrew has said of like, start asking questions. Just like, hey, I saw you do this thing. Why did you make that choice? Or like, did you consider that, maybe that action might have made, or I noticed it making some of the people in the room uncomfortable. Like, did you notice that? Can we talk about that, right? Or like, hey, Andrew, I saw this thing. This person was wearing a DMS shirt. Do you know that person? Can we talk about what happened?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be you directly confronting a person. If you're not comfortable doing that, like you can come to us. Or if it's us doing stuff, I hope that you would feel comfortable coming to us. But if not, like, you can talk to Captain. You can talk to Blue Moon. Like, you can reach out to Ordinals. We fuck up. We hope to get better. But we can only get better if people give us feedback, right? So obviously we think about the things that we do and say, but we're learning and growing all the time too. So hopefully we will improve, but we can improve more quickly if people let us know that the things we did weren't okay.
And speaking of fucking up and getting better, let's talk about safety.
I did have one more quick note about the way that we teach. Andrew alluded to this already of like, we have a specific vocabulary. We use certain terms. We do certain ties in this class. And for our purposes, we're going to ask you all to do the same things, right? So that we can kind of check on it like, yes, that is the way that we taught it. Yes, that is the thing. That doesn't mean it's the only way to do it. And it doesn't mean that it applies in someone else's class. When you're in our class, please do the things the way that we have taught you. When you're in someone else's class, please do the thing the way that they taught you. Because otherwise it's disrespectful, right? It would disrespect us to do it some other way, but mostly we can't know that you did it correctly if you're doing it some other way. But if you do it in someone else's class and you're like, well, OG Pan and Good most times said it's this way, like, we don't care.
Nothing will cause me to grind my teeth down to the gums than if I hear you being like, well, Andrew said, I'll just be like,
Yeah.
like, please, do not do that.
Like,
it's happened to me before, and I was like, I want to disappear into oblivion.
Yes. We are not the authorities. We're the authorities in here. We're not the authorities of the world, right? So please don't do that thing. It's disrespectful. So with that, we're going to talk about safety.
Yeah, let's talk about safety. I'm going to start off with a premise. The premise is nothing that we do in this room will be safe. No matter what you do, it will never be safe. On a long enough timeline, if you are going to engage in rope bondage at any level, you are going to injure someone. You'll either do it physically, you'll do it emotionally, you'll do it psychologically. This is a very complex and nuanced thing that we are engaging in. The type of interactions that we are having with people are often things that they have not explored for themselves or interrogated internally, much less what they're going to encounter when those things start happening. The physicality of those things are pretty abnormal to most folks. So there are going to be instances on a long enough timeline where some sort of injury happens. There is nothing that I can teach you or will be taught in this class that will 100% mitigate all of that all of the time.
And when people say like, oh, well, such and such is safe, what that usually means is they haven't had an injury yet, right? It's not, they will never, because no one can predict that. But there are people who take more care if they have had an injury to look after the person afterward, right?
You are driving a car. On a long enough timeline, you're going to get in an accident. Doesn't matter how good a driver you are, right?
And it might not be a fault of anyone. Things happen. That's why it's an accident.
Some days you just have a bad day.
Yeah.
What does matter is how you take care of yourselves, how you take care of the person that is tying, how you take care of the person who is being tied after those things happen. And it's the responsibility of all of the people who are tying together to make sure of that thing. When it comes to folks who tie frequently with a high variety of partners, this becomes my biggest concern because you are creating a lot of instances with a lot of variables at a high frequency, right? And so at some point, you're not just going to have one failure, but you're going to have multiple failures at once.
Sort of cascading failures.
And the amount of physical support, emotional support, psychological support that you can provide to someone is limited in scope, right? And when that becomes 2, 3, 4 partners, you're not going to be able to help everyone. And in not being able to help everyone, someone is going to feel hurt, right? And it becomes really important for you to understand that as you tie more and more. It becomes really important for you to have deeper and more frequent conversations with people as you tie more and more. There are some sort of simple safety ideas that we'd like to express, but please understand that none of these are a balm to cover all of safety in the world. And you should just take them as like, cool, here are some of the things that Melissa and I do. Melissa and I both carry cutting tools. The types that we use are Benchmade strap cutters. These are meant to cut they're meant to cut like seatbelt strapping. But they're a very small blade. There's a very low percentage chance that you're going to cut anything but the thing that you're intending to cut. The ones that we use are really convenient because they've got this nice little carabiner bit, so I can attach it to a belt. I can attach it to a, you can pass those around. Take a look at it.
Those are discontinued, unfortunately. But I do have a stock of them. If anyone's interested, reach out to me.
Melissa bought a ton of them when we found out we were going to be.
I bought like 20 of them when I found out they're discontinued, because they were only like $30, but now they just don't make them anymore.
If you can't find something like that you feel comfortable in using, use a set of safety shears.
The thing about safety shears is that these are designed to cut fabric, which is flat. Rope, weirdly, not flat. Takes more of like a sawing motion, and even these are not the ideal ones. You can get even like heavier duty shears that are like actual EMT emergency shears. These are like the cheapy ones you can get at CVS. I'm still gonna pass them around just so you can kind of see the difference.
Here's the most important thing. Regardless of what you choose, first and foremost, the thing that you choose should mitigate your opportunities for stabbing and cutting the person that is inroad.
Yes.
So-
Notice both those and the safety hooks, they're curved, right? They don't have a sharp point on them, because what you don't want to do is trying to get to the rope to cut it, you're stabbing the person, right? That would be bad.
Second, you want to have cut rope with the thing you have purchased.
Please practice.
Having it as a safety totem that you keep in your bag but have never used is not going to help you when you need them.
Also notice he said in your bag. So once you're in a scene or you're getting ready for your scene, make sure that thing is at hand's reach, right? It should not be in your bag. It
On
especially
the
should
other
not
side of the
be in the
dungeon.
bag, in
In
the
the
back,
car.
in your car, somewhere else. Like, notice mine are all black, which is not ideal. They do actually, there is a version of the safety hook that come in like bright yellow and like safety orange. Those are even better.
The black is dominant as fuck.
Right.
Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
but it's still black.
Also, you will have noticed on mine, they have my initials on them, so I can identify that these are mine, right? I do recommend, in general, labeling your stuff because, weirdly, a lot of us have like similar colored rope.
We're gonna have 10
similar-
people with about 8 meter length, about 2 millimeter diameter natural rope in here.
Right.
So you might consider putting something of color at the whipped ends of your rope,
Yeah.
something like that to make sure
Something.
to delineate it.
Something.
My rope is this is the weirdest thing. I can just pick it up and smell it and be like, that one's mine.
Also for his, I can tell by the feel of it. Yeah, between the feel and the smell, like we can identify which ones are ours. For me, I knot my buttons at the end a pretty specific way, so that's another way I can tell. Like, come up with a way that you can tell your stuff from other people's stuff.
The
But
last thing
safety is important. With
The
this
last
stuff.
thing I would say with the shears and the cutting tools is know when you cut rope. So a lot of people talk about cutting rope, but they
I
don't
would just
tell
cut
you.
them. I would just cut them down.
They don't tell you when to cut rope and when to do it safely. I would proffer 90% of the time that you are in an emergency, untying is better than cutting rope. The times you need to cut rope are very similar to the times you need to call an ambulance. If someone has a broken bone, if someone is bleeding profusely, if someone has passed out and or is choking, those are instances where cutting becomes smarter than untying someone.
The other instances are you need to evacuate the building.
Yeah,
There
building's
is a
on fire.
fire.
There's
an
an
earthquake. Like beyond that, chances are very low that you are going to need to cut the rope.
And more problematic, chances are higher if you cut the rope outside of those situations that you are creating more danger and not less. The
So-
percentage chance of someone falling
Ah.
or losing their balance because you've cut rope is really, really, really complicated. You are going to be panicked. That person is going to be panicked. It is going to be a difficult situation to be in. It's very important to have a simple rubric of like, this is when I cut rope, this is when I don't cut rope,
The
right?
only time I've ever cut rope in 10 years now, my rope was jammed. I could not untie, right? That's the only instance I've ever needed to use my cutting tool. So that said, right, like that is obviously another instance when you would need to do that. Fortunately, it was during a labbing session. There was no pressure, but I just physically could not get the thing untied. So we had to cut.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about your little safety kit?
Sure, let me,
Oh,
Question.
question.
Safety shears, I've heard, like with the Jibo ones especially, that you're not really supposed to cut with them multiple times.
No.
correct, yeah.
Yeah.
In
So,
terms of practicing, like,
Yeah.
having used them before, but then you can't really use them again.
sure. So the
Oh.
question was, someone in class had heard that, like, especially for these cheapy safety shears, that you're not meant to use them multiple times.
They're
Like,
single use.
They're disposable. So then how do you practice with having cut and knowing that these will cut if you're just supposed to get rid of them? It's a great question. There's not a great answer for that, unfortunately, other than they are recommended to be discarded, but you don't have to, right? So you can try cutting your rope a couple times just to get a sense of like, oh, that's how this works, and hold on to them until you need to use them in an emergency, and then discard them after the emergency, right? Would be my recommendation. Other
Or
than that,
buy a pair and throw one away. Or,
right,
hear me
buy
out
a
here,
couple.
just invest in better shears.
Right.
You're
There-
going to,
like I said, there is the higher sort of the professional grade version. Those do not need to be discarded. Those are what EMTs use. Like they keep them, so you should be okay at that level. And those, I want to say, they're like $30. Like it's not a huge monetary investment.
I'm going to throw something out here. If there's anything we ask you to invest in this room that you are like, I do not have the financial means,
Let us know.
please just tell me. I will buy one for you.
Yeah.
If you need a kit of rope, I'll buy you a kit of rope.
Yeah.
If you need a set of shears, I will buy you a set of shears. No one in this room should be inhibited by the cost of experiencing this thing, limiting their safety or their ability to participate.
Right.
So at any time, for any reason, if you're like, fuck, this feels bad, just fucking come tell me, right?
Yeah.
Please.
So one thing we didn't touch on is sort of why Andrew and I do this, and it's because we were able to learn for free, but also as cis white folks, we have a lot of privilege. We both have fairly well-paying jobs that allow us the privilege to afford all this stuff and teaching for free. So if you're feeling like, I just, like that's gonna push me over my budget for this month, or like that is way out of bounds, just come tell us and we'll see what we can do about getting y'all the things you need to be successful.
Your question?
I have another resource on the cutters.
Sure.
Sure.
I don't have mine on me right
No
now.
worries.
But I've got a seatbelt cutter that I got from like a Bus Depot warehouse online, and you
Well,
can change
and-
out the blades as well.
Nice.
And if you
So-
want,
yeah.
if you want a strap cutter, like if you get done today and you're like, I'm in the market for a strap cutter, let's go buy one. Right up Broadway is a place called Ross Cutlery.
Yep.
They specialize in knives. They specialize in knife sharpening. They've got every type of blade that you would be interested in, including strap cutters.
Yeah.
And you can go in and say, I need a strap cutter. I need a set of professional grade EMT shears, and they will have multiple options for you to choose from.
Yeah. And they do carry Benchmade, just not that particular one.
Yep.
Right? So another
Question from the back.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what was that again?
The store name.
Ross
The store name is
Cutlery.
Ross Cutlery.
Yeah.
ROSS Cutlery.
Yeah.
And it's
they're,
on Broadway and Second,
Between
or
Third-
Broadway and Third. Excuse
between
me.
3rd and 4th. If you know where Grand Central Market is, it's directly across the street from there. They have a large sign. You can't miss it. They're open till I believe 5 or 6 p.m.
Yeah.
So that said, I just wanted to talk about a few things that you might consider having in a safety kit or like an emergency kit. Number one, absolutely recommended, not for safety, for your health and well-being, is some sort of hand cream, especially as we're in the cold months. Your hands are going to get torn up, right? Rope is very dry. It's going to suck the moisture out of your hands. Your cuticles are going to thank you if you use some kind of moisturizer. You should just have that everywhere, not just in your rope bag. Things you might consider, like a Tiger Balm or a heating warming agent and bruise ointment, really helpful. A hot compress, again, warming, helpful, soothing after something happens. A safety blanket, tiny, it's tiny, but it can help your partner feel more comforted if they, like, I know for me, after I come out of rope, I tend to get very cold. And then some other things, gloves, right? If you do happen to
Just for fun, not for rope, but just for fun.
oh, sometimes sexy.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. If you do happen to get a hangnail and you're bleeding, you probably don't want to bleed on the person you're tying. He's gotten bled on before. I wasn't thrilled about that. I do recommend non-latex in case folks have latex allergies. So like nitrile is a good option. They usually come in one of 3 sizes. Get the one that fits you. If you get too small, they're gonna tear, right? That's not helpful. I like to have some sort of pain relief. So like an Advil, generally pretty okay. Some tapes, surgical tape, or sorry, this one is the non-adhesive. So like it sticks to itself, not to other things, which is good for bandages. This is electrical tape. If you're in a club, there are some, especially here in LA, where they don't allow nipples. So this can be good for nipples, but also if you are tying and you're noticing wear on your fingers, it's good at joints. So like you can wrap your finger with electrical tape to prevent getting, rope burn on yourself or tearing up. I tend to get dryness right in that inner part of my finger. So putting some electrical tape there can help alleviate that, especially if you're tying a bunch. A couple other things, if someone happens to pass out, which probably won't happen, but sometimes does, or if someone's feeling lightheaded, wet wipes, like just the alcohol from a wet wipe can help bring them back. Another thing that you can get, but it's harder to find because you have to be very careful with it, is smelling salts. A note about these, even though the name is smelling salts and you do want to apply it to their nose, do not open it in their face. It is a chemical compound and it can cause chemical burns. So the way that you use these is you open it away from the person and then you bring it toward their face, right? These also are single use, so I only have one in my bag. A friend who's a nurse gave it to me. They're harder to get, but if someone does pass out, they are very effective at reviving that person. So that's something else that you might consider having in your bag. That said, none of this is required. These are optional things you might consider. As a person who's going to be in rope, as part of your negotiation, you may want to ask, do you have a safety kit? What's in your safety kit? Can I see it? Have you ever needed to use any of these things? If the person you are talking to is uncomfortable with that line of questioning, you might consider that a red flag for whether you want to engage with that person. Not necessarily, but it's like one note of like, they don't seem to have ever thought about that. Maybe we shouldn't play. So I feel like
Yeah.
that brings us into negotiation.
Yeah, that brings us into negotiation. And similar to safety, where I started off with the premise of, hey, nothing's ever safe. I want to start off with a specific premise for negotiation, which is I have no emotional investment in the way that you negotiate. What I would propose to you is that you need a methodology of how you negotiate, and that methodology needs to be consistent. So you need to have an approach. It might be a worksheet. It might be something else that you use to assess how you want to and what you want to do with partners that you engage in. And the reason that it needs to be consistent is that that is the only way that you are going to diagnose if your system has holes and failures. If you consistently keep running into a similar challenge each time, it sounds like it's a problem in your system. Reassess your system and build something to assess for those holes, right? But if you don't have a standardized way of approaching it, you'll never kind of know. And that becomes really, really hard. Some things that you should consider in your approach to negotiating with someone. You should consider asking them about physical aspects of their body that are ongoing and persistent. Things like epilepsy, things like asthma, things like allergies. If you treat your rope with some sort of nut oil and that person is allergic to nuts, that's bad news bears, right?
There are people with grass allergies, and shocking, bamboo's a grass. So
Yeah.
that could be a negative interaction for them.
Yeah.
Knowing these things in advance, especially for people who are newer to being tied, they might not have considered that, or they might not realize that, you know, your rope comes from a grass. Maybe they've only ever been in cotton, or maybe they've only ever been in nylon, right? Where they're not going to have those issues.
Secondary bit that I would recommend is framing things in and around how that person is today. How do you feel today? What rope would you like today? How have you been for food? How have you been for hydration today? Like,
Is
how
there
is
anything
today
stressing you out today?
felt emotionally? Is there a specific thing that you're looking for from rope right now? Melissa and I have been tying together for 10 years. The bulk of our negotiation when we negotiate a scene, because a lot of it's become shorthand, the bulk of it is about, what do you feel like today? What do you want this to be right now?
And sometimes it's something like chill and relax, and other times it's like some show-offy bullshit. And we know what that means for us. But as you're starting to work with newer people, or just, you know, you're trying negotiating for the first time, that might need a lot more context.
The third thing is include what aftercare looks like. Hey, when we're done, what's going to feel good for you?
Some people, being in rope, they don't want anyone to touch them afterward. Some people want lots of cuddles and a warm blanket and a snack. It depends, and only the person who is, going to be the one in the rope can tell you what that thing is, and that might change day to day, week to week.
Also talk about what it looks like when something goes wrong.
Yeah. Well, even before that, the person in the rope is going to have their own needs. The person tying is going to have needs afterward too, right? So making sure that both sides of the negotiation express what that looks like. I know for me as a top, we didn't actually touch on this. We're both switches, but for me as a top, I'm going to want to at some point tidy my rope, right? It doesn't have to be immediately after. Sometimes I might ask the person who I'm tying, like, hey, will you just help me find the ends and bite of each rope so I can tidy it later? But that can be part of the negotiation. Like, what does each side need and how soon after does that need to happen?
Mm-hmm. And then, what does it look like when things go wrong? Like, what do you look like when this is not fun? What happens if something bad happens, and how do we take care of each other afterwards? Having some sort of an injury doesn't necessarily always happen to the person being tied. As somebody who has been both physically and emotionally injured while tying, also in accidentally injuring someone, that is an emotional stress on the person who was tying in those instances, right? And so, cool, how do we take care of each other? What does that look like?
Yeah.
And then the final bit that I would proffer about negotiation and coming up with what your own rubric is for this thing is negotiation does not have to be competitive. It does not need to be an interrogation. It can be flirtation. And it can be part of a thing that draws you both into doing something together, and it can be really fucking sexy. If your negotiation is clinical and boring, that's not negotiation's fault. That's your fault, right?
That said, if you come to it from a position of abundance, of like, hey, this is just the first time, hopefully of many times, that we will be doing this thing, you may not feel so compelled to run through every possibility, right? And you can focus on, you know what, these are the things that I'm really excited about today. What do you think about that? Or, what is sounding awesome? Like, what 2 things do you want to hit for today? And then you can always leave that door open of like, well, that third thing that you mentioned, we could do that next time.
I'm going to make a hot take right now. The first time you have sex with someone is very rarely the best time you have sex with someone, because you don't know each other and there's a lot to figure out. The same thing when you tie someone. You don't need to do everything. Do enough to figure out a little bit. One of the wisest things that was sort of ever said to me about kink in general is that the optimum outcome for your rope scene or any scene that you do is that you get done, you look at each other and say, that was so fucking rad, let's plan when we can do the next thing. That is the optimum outcome. The next outcome down is like, oh, we both had a good time, that was nice. The next outcome under that is sort of like, that was a thing we did.
True.
The next outcome under that is, I don't want to do that thing with you again. The worst possible outcome is, I don't want to do that thing ever again. And there are a lot of people who have had the experience of wanting something very, very badly, finally being brave enough to go out into the world, to talk to someone else, and to get into a place where they can have that thing that they think that they want, and the experience for them is so bad that they do not want to have it again. And that is really, really, really fucking unfortunate, right? So remember that when you are considering how you negotiate with people. Anything else you want to talk about?
I think that's it.
Cool.
We're at a place for a good
With that
time
it,
for a break.
we're at a good place for a 10-minute break. So everyone get up, get some water, go to the restroom, do those things. For folks on the stream,
We'll see you back.
you're
in a
going to
few minutes.
disappear. We'll see you in 10 minutes.
Hey everyone, welcome back. So we're doing, for today's actual hands-on rope lesson today, you should have already all seen the video for single and double column ties. How many people actually looked at that and practiced with it?
Show of hands. Yay! I am going to do a thing that is probably the most important thing that we will do whenever we teach you any forms. I am going to tell you why you are tying the thing that you are tying.
Yeah, the great thing about this model of like flipped classroom where we give you the videos in advance is you have lots of time to practice in advance. But we don't spend a ton of time in those videos telling you why the fuck that thing, right? That's not what those videos are for. They're much more like step by step, here's how to do it.
So
Class is when you get that context of why. So that's what we're here for now.
So a quick show of hands, and feel free to jump in on the chat. Who here prefers a Somerville Bolin as their single column knot of choice? I would say about half the class. All right, so let's talk about why we don't do that thing. The thing that is convenient about a Somerville Bolin, it is a unidirectional knot. You tie it one way, it works in any ways. As long as you construct the knot properly, it will work.
The beauty of a Somerville Bolin is it's very elegant. You can tie it very quickly. A lot of people fumble with it when they're first learning it, but once you get it down, it's pretty smooth. It goes every direction, and most importantly, the running end, so the side that's going away from the bite, like the looped over end, the side that's going away is the side that tightens it. So as you're constructing your tie, you're actually reinforcing the knot. This is completely opposite of the one that we had you learn.
And there's a reason why it's completely opposite
There's
of
an
the one that you learned.
Yeah.
It is very easy with a Somerville Bolin to become unintentional about tying it. You do not need to pay attention to it because it will always work as long as you construct it, right? The knot that we are having you tie, the book knot, the honmusubi, the square knot, whatever anyone calls it, is finicky and it's hard
And you
and
have
it's
to pay
directional.
attention.
And you have to fucking pay attention to it every single time you tie it. In addition to that, it is going to diagnose what you do with the rest of your pattern from then. If you interact with it roughly, if you aren't paying attention to tension in other parts of your tie, it is going to fall apart. If you are creating one of your patterns and you look down and something's wrong with your single column tie, you fuck something up. And it's an important thing to understand for us as a meta narrative of how patterns work. If you build your foundation poorly, that becomes a pebble that rolls downhill in the snow, that becomes a snowball, that becomes an avalanche, and everything after that becomes compromised because what you did in the beginning.
Remember we talked about those cascading failures? It starts at the single column.
Oh, we understand that this is crappy and hard.
It's a pain in the ass.
Part of the reason that we have set up this lesson for this month and the fact that you are not learning another pattern next month is that you are going to have 2 months to get really, really familiar with these two specific knots. And for those of you who are more advanced in your tying, who have spent more time with rope, I understand that this is going to seem really, really remedial. I am giving you the gift of only having to singularly focus on one thing for 2 whole months. As odd as that may seem, please sit down and interrogate every little bit of what you do with tying this knot until you feel 100% confident with it.
There's one additional reason that we teach this particular knot and single column, and it's because a lot of the folks that we've learned from have been instructors from Japan, and this is the knot that they use. So if you only ever tie a Somerville Bolin, and then you want to go into a class with someone that you paid several $100s for, and you only have access to them for 2 days, and surprise you have to learn this single column, that's going to be a waste of your money.
And we have been in the environment before where the instructor stops that workshop to teach everyone how to do a single column tie. And you are not only going to be pissed off that you are wasting your money, but everyone in that fucking class is going to be pissed off that you're wasting their money, buddy. Be ready for it.
Yeah. So again, the gift of this is you'll be exposed to one more thing that, you know, you have it in your arsenal, in your handbag, whatever you want to say. You know how to do this, why it works, how it works, what to look out for, and like how finicky and specific it can be and should be.
So with that said, everybody tie me a single column tie with a book knot / umasubi / square knot.
Yeah.
When you are done tying one around whichever limb you are tying on the person you are tying,
Raise your hand.
raise your hand. Either Melissa or I or Captain or Blue Moon will take a look at it. For folks at home, this is time for you to practice. The cameras won't be on, but you should practice. You've decided to devote 2 hours of your life today to get better at this thing. You should practice.
Go do
Are we good? All right, friends. So some quick observations about everyone's knots. First and foremost, everyone seems to understand the construction of the knot broadly. So like what steps the knot goes in to exist. So kudos on that. I really appreciate all of your practice. We wanted to take a second to talk really quickly about like what looks good in a knot, or what, if you're self-assessing, if you're at home and looking at your knot, how can you tell what good looks like?
and like why it's important.
Yeah, why it's important. So first and foremost, you want your knots to be as small and compact as possible. They should feel like tiny little stones in your hands.
Pebbles.
Little
Tiny
pebbles. We're making pebbles, not potatoes.
Yes.
The reason that that's important is that the more space or air that you have in a knot, the more likely it is to fail or come apart. So the smaller and tighter you can get it, the better that's going to be. In service of doing that, there are some things that you can look out for that maybe are creating space in your knot where you don't want it. So in the structure of the knot itself, where it wraps around the two lines of the column that you've created, if there's anything that's twisted, if there's anything that weirdly, and I'll try to describe this a little better, is not folded, there will be instances where those things are not moving as efficiently as they can move, and thus are creating space, and thus are creating opportunities for your knot to fail. When I say folded, what I mean is as you put two ropes together, so when you fold them in half in the manner that we do for the way that we tie, they become a flat unit, almost like a belt, right? And you sort of want those to fold as a belt would fold in creating a knot to create the most efficient movement around the column that you've created, right?
So rather than, obviously, your ropes are round, right? This is tricky to then make something flat and folded. The sort of inclination is to kind of just wrap stuff, right? And when you're wrapping, likelihood is more that you're gonna like twist and get weird bubbles or buckles or whatever in there. What we're going for is something where the ropes lay flat against each other. That is the most efficient manner, right? In order to, when we say fold, we literally mean like fold it directly over on itself and then pull it through. And when I tie down, I'm going to notice right now there's like all this space, it's weird, it's wonky. You want to tighten it all the way down, right? There's no space, there's no air, I can't see through that. That is compact. That's what we're looking for, right? If I twist it at all, right, these lines get twisted over each other. If I pull down, it's not gonna get as flat, it's not gonna get as compact. There's gonna be space, there's gonna be air, it's gonna come apart. This is bad.
The second thing that I wanted to note for everyone is please pay close attention to the tensioning of the cuff itself so that the 4 lines, so the 2 wraps around whatever column that you're tying, that those 4 lines, the tension is similar across them, right? This is less singularly impactful now, but as we progress farther and farther, and you're the person who's in rope is feeling more tension on the cuffs that you're creating, like feeling one single strand of rope as opposed to all 4 strands of rope is a wildly different experience. And to go back to one of the first things we talked about in this class, we want to be assholes on purpose, not on accident. So make sure as you're creating those cuffs, you're really paying attention to the tension of the cuff, the wraps of the cuff itself, around whatever you're tying. The third bit that I wanted to bring up that I don't know, that I want folks to experiment with, is the directionality of the knot that we are tying. Show of hands in the room, and if you don't understand this, that's why you're here, is to find out this thing. Does anyone not understand how the directionality of this knot works?
I'm gonna say
Like if I wanted you to tie it in the opposite direction of the way that you tied it now, if I dictated to you what direction the knot needed to go in, would you be able to understand how to tie the knot in order to go in that direction?
no. I'm gonna
Okay.
say no. You should just explain.
So let's talk about this. I'm gonna sit close enough to where people can see it on the camera here. I would encourage everyone in the room to scooch as close as they need to scooch to see and understand the thing that I'm doing without necessarily being on camera, unless they want to be on camera.
Right now, it's this camera, and it's only seeing these 4
Yeah.
squares, so
So
you
actually,
should all be fine.
This will be easier for me to do on someone else.
Yeah.
So, how does the directionality of this knot work? We'll start off by me tying one of these,
She's gonna tie it on my leg.
and I would like one of you to assess which direction the rope needs to run once I have tied the knot. So, once around, twice around. I'm doing this in a completely opposite manner of the way that I would do it. So my rope handling is going to be garbage, right? So I pull this away.
And notice everything is right now currently flat. There's some space between my leg and the rope. So there's plenty of room to both adjust, but also if I needed to move or he needed to run something below here, like there's plenty of space for that.
All right. So now I have created.
In
Come on
tying
now.
this knot, he has actually made it a little uneven.
Yep.
So just something to be mindful of as you construct your knot, you might mess up that tension that you set so beautifully.
And we talked about this with
Yeah.
a few different folks.
Yeah.
All right. Which direction?
So now that this, you'll notice actually while we're here, notice that when this is properly constructed, this knot, very small, very compact, there's no space. Also, your running end, this side that is leading toward the rest of the rope, and the bite, so the curved part where we double over the rope, they're running parallel to the cuff. That is correct. This is part of how you can tell that it's done correctly. Now,
If you tie it wrong, they'll be running perpendicular, and you can just look at it and be like, "Oh, that's
well,
wrong."
that's wrong. Also, if it's not this like neat little triangle shape or heart or curved thing,
Book,
book,
mustache,
whatever
walrus.
this looks like to you, whatever you say what that looks like to you, if you don't see this, especially if you see that these like 3 are in a row diagonally, you
Bad
have
news
done
bears.
it wrong, right? But
So-
now that this is done, which way should this rope go? Where would we go to construct our tie?
So it
So-
needs to go towards the camera,
Toward
And
the
then-
camera
and then which direction?
and toward the room.
Toward this corner.
Yeah.
That's
Yay.
correct. Do you understand why it's that way? Do you understand how I got it to be that way?
I think no.
Okay. So there are two things. A, the directionality that I start in, and B, the directionality that I wrap the leg in. So as I untie, what directionality have I wrapped the leg in?
So notice it's coming downward.
Which
right?
way which way is the bike going?
But also notice that the running end is coming out and toward y'all, right? That's the way it's gonna end. So if you start going, right, whatever way you want to end, if you're wrapping with the bite, you wanna do the opposite.
If I go this way,
So he's wrapping upward.
so if I flip,
Toward y'all.
if I just flip the way I've wrapped the rope, which way is the knot gonna wanna run when I'm done? It's gonna wanna go that way, correct. If I go,
So to the question from y'all of, does it matter if we go over or under? Yes.
Yes.
if I go this way,
So he's gone over now,
look at the way I've started.
or under, yeah. So,
Exactly. If I go this way,
right, so it absolutely does matter.
right?
That said.
So there are
yeah.
4 different ways that you can approach wrapping, meaning there are 4 different directions that knot can end up running.
Remember, we said one name for this is a square knot? It's because there's 4 directions in the square? Ah.
So, you understand now that not only is this not finicky and shitty to put together, but you also have to think a lot about it before you do it.
That said.
This is on purpose.
Yeah, that said, if you ever find yourself being like, I fucked it up, I'm going the wrong way, and this sucks, and I don't wanna have to
I don't want to untie it because I'm lazy.
Well, I'm lazy, or I'm in a rush, or whatever, like everything else about it is right, except the way that I'm going to end, right? I get it tied, it's all beautiful, my tension's great, my knot is perfect, but I don't wanna go that way. That's wrong. I can take the running end, flip it in on itself so that it's flat and compact, and run the bite through there.
Come on, let's go.
Unless I fuck it up.
Uh-huh.
I can drop this loop over the bite, and in doing so, I can change the direction by 90 degrees. Right? Before it was heading toward y'all that way, now it's heading toward us over here.
Each half hitch you add, and you
Is-
can continue to add half hitches,
Right.
will move the directionality of the rope 90 degrees.
90 degrees.
Until you move it all the way around.
Around that box, around that square.
What you're doing is creating a giant annoying knot that will be really
Yeah.
hard to untie.
This is gross.
But
This is gross, and I don't recommend it.
it is inelegant to me,
Right.
and I would find it aesthetically reprehensible.
Correct.
But if that's the thing that you need to do, you're the boss of you, boo.
Right. So one other thing that we didn't really talk about.
We've got a question really quickly.
Okay.
Question?
So I've been told previously that when you do a square knot, you have to do a hitch above it for safety reasons.
A hitch meaning that like that half hitch that I just added? Okay.
Above it
I
for
was
safety?
just gonna talk about that.
Okay.
So
The question for folks at home is that the person in class said that they had historically heard that when creating the type of knot that we're creating, one needs to add a half hitch above it in order to increase the safety.
at the end there. So the thing I was just demoing that you have to always do that. That is a way of thinking. It's not a thing I've ever learned, but that's okay. The tricky part about this, and as we kind of talked about with the Somerville Bowlin, as you use your running ends to construct your tie, you're tightening the knot, right? The nice thing, a weird and useful thing about this particular knot is that it is easily deconstructed. So should you need to get your partner out quickly, you can use it as a safety lever to pull it apart, right? You pull back the opposite direction of how you were going, and suddenly you can get to the bite and untie it very quickly.
You can also untie it from the bite direction,
Right.
right?
So
If
to
you
prevent that from happening, or the collapse that we've kind of talked about, you can add that half hitch as a safety measure. Absolutely. Again, it's less aesthetically pleasing. It's a little bulkier, and especially on someone's wrists, this is going to be less comfortable.
but
But
you're increasing the amount of time it takes to untie the knot,
That.
right? So a thing that you're going to hear a lot throughout the trajectory of this month is to think of the decisions that you make in a triangle of risk, speed, aesthetic. You are always having to pay off one of those in deference to another. There are often times where I will do things that are more risky, but that I understand are faster for me to interact with because I am trading my speed and my ability to untie something to mitigate the risk that I would otherwise mitigate through some sort of construction of the rope, right? And these are decisions and trade-offs that you need to make yourself as you are tying someone. So if for you, you're like, I need that extra half inch to feel safe, then you need to do what you need to do to feel safe. But you need to build protocols to understand how you're going to untie someone once that happens. So ultimately, if you going out in life, your single column tie choice is the Somerville Bolin, great, grand, cool, that's the thing that you do. I entirely support you in that decision, not in class, but in that decision in life. You're gonna need to know how to untie that knot when it's under tension, and that knot gets really dense when it's under tension. So, cool, just understand, don't make the decision arbitrarily, make the decision purposefully. Understand the trade-off that you're making and why you're making it, and then understand what you need to do to mitigate that trade-off should a negative outcome occur, right?
And just one note.
That's the important underlying thing to get to with all of this stuff.
And one note about that, for the Somerville Bolin or other knots that tighten from the running end side, there is a tool called a Marlin spike that I would highly recommend you have in your toolkit as an additional safety implement for helping loosen that knot, because they do tighten down immensely once they've been under tension.
Yep.
So that
So
is my
does-
only sort of qualifying thing about tying with those types of knots, is like, you might need extra safety gear.
Does everyone feel that they better understand the directionality of how a square knot works? Excellent.
Are there any questions?
Let this be a lesson. If you do not understand something, please fucking ask.
Yeah.
We have thought about this an inordinate amount of time, and boy, are we going to be excited to share it.
That's why we're here.
Yeah. The second bit that we were hoping y'all would practice for this month is a double column tie. So we'd really appreciate if you take some time to practice your double column tie. In a similar manner, once you've completed your first one,
Tie
raise
it.
your hand.
Yeah.
Someone will come over and talk you through that thing and give you some feedback, and you can continue to practice from there.
Yep.
So for everyone at home,
Do your double
please
column.
do your double column tie. Take this time to practice that thing. Thank you. All right, friends. We are back in for the last bit of conversation that I want to have with folks. It seems like folks very much better understand directionality in the conversations that I had, which is fantastic. I wanted to take a second to sort of talk about practicing and like what to do when you practice. A lot of folks don't necessarily think about a standardized approach to the way they practice, or think about the manner in which they specifically approach practice. Everyone's learning is going to be slightly different, so I'm not sort of here to dictate that thing to you.
Like how much time you spend practicing, what, when you do it during your day or your week or any of that, like that's up to you. You're adults. We trust that you will practice. You've committed to practice as part of our cohort.
But if I can make one recommendation to all of you, it's a general approach to how you practice. So there's been a lot of research done on how people learn, and there's been specifically a lot of research done on how people learn sort of neuromuscular skills,
So physical skills.
physical skills, and it's important specifically to break those skills down into small singular pieces. And it's important to intensely practice those small singular pieces in sequence, in sort of fairly what I would call short bursts. So your attention span is probably not going to last more for intensive, like paying specific attention to these things, probably not more than somewhere between 7 to 12 minutes, right? So you're going to want to break down the thing that you're doing into pieces and then focus on those things probably somewhere around 7 to 12 minutes.
So for this particular lesson, right, if you're working on your single column, say, maybe just drill wrapping the limb. Just that for 10 minutes. Set a timer. If your mind starts to wander, if you start thinking about what you're gonna have for dinner, stop. It's fine. Come back to it. So the wraps, cool. Do that for a few minutes. Done. Awesome. Feeling good about it. Maybe then practice just how you finish that knot, right? What hand motion do you have to do for that knot? And you know, maybe another one would be like, which direction am I gonna go? So for this one, like, I'm gonna knock out all 4 corners. How do I wrap it differently for each one, right? For the double column, maybe I, you know, again, wrapping, but like with that extra loop through, like how does your hand work for that? Figuring that out, what feels most comfortable, which direction, can you do it different directions?
If you are having problems creating motions that feel natural to you, if you're like, I just can't figure out what the fucking efficient way to do this in all the directions, start at the end. Create the outcome that you want. When you've created that outcome, the rope is already run in every direction it will need to run for you to be successful. And then start to systematically go backwards until you understand all of the motions you need to untie, then reverse that process to tie. When I was learning to tie, the biggest mistake that I made was that I thought that I needed to sit down and just tie single column ties, tie single column tie, tie single column tie, and not pay attention to it. Rather than doing it a million times and not paying attention to it, every time you do it, try to be slightly better at it. Take 7 minutes and try to be slightly better. Try to touch the rope slightly fewer times. Try to make the movements slightly more efficient. Try to make the knot slightly smaller each and every time you do it for a fairly short burst of time. I think that you'll find your improvement is going to go a lot quicker than just sitting and sort of unconsciously doing a thing. Like, consciously get better at all of the aspects. You all know what good looks like now. You all know how to assess the thing that you've done. Be critical of yourself. You want to get good at this. The person who's pushing you to be as good at this thing as you can be is you. And only you know the level that you want to get good at. So start to consider that now. Start to answer those questions and really start to use that as motivation for when you practice. Does anyone have any final questions before we log off the stream and go through introductions?
I have a couple quick notes. So one about what good looks like for your double column. Similar to the single column, the wraps should be flat. Your knot should be small and compact, like a pebble. Unlike the single column, for your double column, when it ends, the ropes should be perpendicular to the cuff itself, right? So that's one way you can look at it, is like, are these ropes running the opposite direction from the cuff? That is correct, right? A couple other things, especially once we get to, oh, do you have a question? Cool. Once we get to up to the third rope, I have created a set of flashcards that are called "What Does Good Look Like?" But within those, there are a few of them that have to do with the knot having collapsed at the wrist, like on the single column. So you might look at those, and those are just on the regular DMS website. The set of flashcards that you can look at that and like help you to identify, like, oh, the single column fell apart there. I see what that looks like when that happens in a larger pattern. In addition to that, I know on the syllabus for today we mentioned like types of rope and how to treat rope and all of that. Obviously, we didn't have time for that. We have a huge FAQ also on the website that outlines our process that we use to treat rope, like step by step with pictures and a whole bunch of stuff, like written out instructions. So I would just point you to that. If anybody has trouble finding it, feel free to ping me, Discord, Slack, whatever works best for you, and I can send you the link. But that, like, rather than spending your class time where you can tie, talking about that stuff, we can just do it in the written form. So if you have questions, once you've looked at that, feel free again then to ask us.
Anything else?
I think that's all I wanted to cover for
Okay.
today.
Any other questions from y'all?
Office hours.
Yeah, remember office hours are tomorrow from 6 to 8 p.m. on the Discord. Feel free to drop in even if you're bored and have nothing to do.
And one quick note, for next month, I know that when we interviewed y'all and everything that we communicated was, we'll be on the third Sunday of the month, third Sunday. Next month, we're gonna be on the second Sunday. Please come on I believe it's December 11th.
This will be like a 2-time occurrence in the course of your learning, just to make sure that people have space to travel for holidays and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We found that it's easier to set that in this particular month earlier.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're gonna have to do a bunch of makeup classes.
Right.
So I will be spamming multiple reminders for y'all, but just please keep in mind that it's gonna be 1 week earlier next month.
Yeah, so next month, it's gonna be the second Sunday. Question?
Oh, and makeup class, 'cause I can't do.
Yeah, we talked
yeah.
about it.
I'll email.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. If you do ever have to do a makeup lesson, please let us know in advance that you will need to do that if you know in advance. And then you'll coordinate with other people from your cohort who also may have missed. And if you are available to, tune into the live stream. And then if you still feel like you need
Or
personalized attention
or
from
watch
us.
the saved video from the live stream.
Correct. That's what like, watch the live stream, pay attention to the live stream, and then if you still have questions, of course, ask us, schedule the makeup, all that stuff. I will be posting like a quick walkthrough of the website, like what's where, because it's a little bit confusing, broken up. Primarily the stuff that's in your password protected part is like your personal contact information. So we don't want that public.
We're keeping your secrets.
Right. Pretty much everything else is gonna be in the public part, so I just wanna make sure you know where to look for stuff.
Because if you ask us stuff like, what are we doing next month? I'm going to shake my fist at the sky and go, you have a syllabus! And then, yeah.
Cool.
All right.
So that said, thanks everybody. We are
Bye,
at
everybody on the
time.
stream. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.